Longevity Lifestyle Designers. This is Gavin here with secretsoflongevity.com. Today I've got a presentation done by my great friend Tracy Young, who is a holistic nutritionist, and her wonderful practice is focused around getting people who, no matter what dietary philosophy that's already subscribed to, and just improving what it is they're already doing. Whether that's a complete overhaul, but she can also work with people who are doing, veganism, vegetarianism, raw foodism, more of like a paleo thing, and helps them eliminate all the extraneous bits that could be preventing them from having better health, and even suggesting things that they might need to change if their paradigm is currently not working. So a very similar approach to what I like to recommend on my channel and in my work. And so of course I wanted to share that with you today, and this is more specifically on just one topic, and maybe we'll have her on again in the future. This is on fermenting sauerkraut, but other types of veggies. This is lactic acid fermentation, and she gives a whole step-by-step process and answers some questions. You can also find information about Tracy on her site and her Facebook page in the links below if you want to find out more what she's doing. So without further ado, here's some instructions and tips on how to ferment your own veggies at home.
I'll show you. Why don't we just kind of go ahead? I'll even just kind of show you some techniques of just an easy, simple one, the recipe that you have, the sauerkraut lacto-fermentation style, of just basically how easy it can be. It's just getting the cabbage. So I'm kind of doing the whole old school remedy here of no food processors or blenders, but I generally do use a food processor when I do it, just because I often will do it in large batches. But that's the thing, is you kind of get overwhelmed thinking you have to make large batches, but you can make a jar, just even one jar for yourself. So I've just sort of shredded up the cabbage here, just with my knife, and just sort of, it doesn't, whatever size, it doesn't really matter, because that's the thing, is it's really about personal preference. Because you can put it in the food processor and almost blend it and still have the same effects. It's just whether or not you want it in the long shreds or the small pieces. Yeah, so basically you're just kind of chopping it up, putting it in here, and then from there what you want to do. So this recipe has 2 tablespoons of salt. And the salt really is what's needed, because what it does is the salt initially for that first short period is going to be sort of killing off any of the bacteria that you don't want to be growing, any of the just any of the bad bacteria. So that's the salt kind of carries it until the natural lactic acid from the vegetables comes out and then starts to basically take over the process and kind of goes from there. So I put the salt in. This recipe is just caraway, so I just have the caraway seeds here. Sometimes I'll just kind of grind them up a little bit, but you can just throw them in whole. So throw those in. And then this is my technique, is just grabbing a jar, and then you just want to squish them. So you're just kind of pounding them. I don't want to pound too hard. But even if you kind of see as I'm doing it, you see how like the juices are starting to get watery. So that's what you want it to be doing, is just getting the juices out. So you really want to be like breaking it up as much as you can, and this is where food processor does come in handy. So sometimes I'll even do throw in half the cabbage in the food processor and really blend it up, and then chop the other half, so then you kind of get a bit of both the textures, right? So you don't have to. It depends if you want an arm workout that day or not. Pound it away.
Does it matter what type of bowl you're mixing it in?
No.
Because on the internet it kept saying glass, glaze, rocks, and
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different, like you can make it in certain things and make it in a crock. And, I've done it in so many different pots and bowls. And
You just wouldn't make it in plastic probably, or do we need a plastic?
I mean, if that's all you have, then,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't.
especially for the mixing part. That's
Well,
what
mixing.
I was looking for.
Yeah.
The bowl with.
A really important thing, though, before you start, is you want to make sure that you've sterilized everything, just to make sure that you don't have any, just to avoid anything that might be around. So
Sterilize like the soap and water, or?
sterilizing, I usually put all my jars and everything just in the sink really quick and just pour some boiling water over top of them. And and then just make sure everything's really, yeah, so this is, so you just kind of see this happening, it started getting juicier and juicier.
So does it matter about metal touching? I know with kefir it's
Yes.
soil.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, with kefir it does, not with this though. Yeah. All right, so then you're just gonna scoop it in your jar. So as you're putting it in here, you want to be packing it, packing it, packing it. So that's where I would probably be wanting to break this up a little bit more. Smash it a bit more. Alright, so we're just gonna stop there. So you really want to pack it in. And then you'll hear, it depends on what resource you're looking at, because you can see two different examples of this. So one could be just that you're pouring in the water, because you want it to be totally submerged, so it's kind of just letting it drip down.
Is it distilled or not?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily matter. I wouldn't probably want to be using tap water, just with the chlorine in the tap water. This water that we have here is actually from that alkalinized water, the Kangen water that we have here. But spring water or anything with Nestle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're packing that in and then pouring the water. So you may read somewhere something called a brine. And you can make a brine by putting water and a little bit of this in a blender and blending it up to a liquid. And then adding that in here. So that's originally when I first was strict on doing that. Realized that really just adding the water does the exact same thing. So
Does it speed it up to do the blender?
no, I didn't find any difference about adding the brine. So
Can you make it creamier though, Tracy?
No.
Like if you, did you blend some of the cabbage, so didn't
You,
it have like a
such a minimal
creamy
amount
dressing?
that no, not really. Yeah, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. And I usually shred as much, texture-wise. I mean, it depends on how much you shred of the other stuff. All right, so you want to make sure that it's submerged. Is the point. So the other key thing is this is lower than what I would normally do, but this one has like the fruit. Are on the jar, because you don't really want to go much. You want to leave definitely an inch or two on the top, and then you're going to keep a cabbage leaf. So those of you that have used a crock, this is kind of like your weight that goes in at the top of your crock. So you put that in, just fold it however. I've even used kale leaves because I didn't save enough cabbage. And then you just push it down, and usually push it till it's that there's enough water in there. And screw it on.
So then it doesn't matter if that piece is actually submerged?
No, that's holding everything down, because that piece, that's what that is to keep everything else down.
Just the lid.
Yeah. And then you put your lid on tight.
That was the part that got moldy on it in like kimchi.
Yeah. So
How are kimchi different from sauerkraut?
I'll get to that one in a sec. So you just put your lid on, and then depending on the temperature in the environment of where it is, it could take anywhere from 5 to 7, maybe a little bit more in the winter months, but just depending on where it is in your house. You're going to know when it's done. You'll probably start to bubble. The top you won't be able to,
5 to 7
start
what?
to- Yeah. Yeah, sorry. And it'll start to, you'll see the pressure.
You just leave it up? Or,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the longer you leave it, the more fermented it's going to be. If you ever, because sometimes you'll see it starts to rise, so that's where you really want to make sure you leave the room. The cabbage leaf is going to keep everything down. And once it starts to rise, if it looks like it's going to burst out on you, because sometimes I've even opened them, and if it's to that point, you want to open it probably in the sink, because it might do a bit of a all over, and that's when you've got a good crow for sure. So just, once you've opened it though, you want to store it in the refrigerator, the cold storage, or wherever it is that you're keeping it. The one thing, so this was my first little experiment, is I had some friends saying that theirs were bubbling over and making noise, so they kept loosening the lid and kind of letting out the gas and letting in the air. So I thought, I'm going to try that, because I had overfilled a few that I just did last week. So I was doing that. The ones that I did that with molded, I noticed. Because it is an anaerobic process, you don't want, that's why you want to make sure your lid is on. I mean, you don't want to like squeeze it on, but you want it on there tight. So you don't want to be letting the oxygen get in there. So, yeah, that's it, that's all. Open it up and enjoy.
So no flavor in this, just this?
This one is just, this one I have for sample at the front, and I find it tastes pickly. It's kind of like the traditional sort of sauerkraut taste, that this one here. So this is kind of an easy one. You don't even have to add the caraway seeds. You can choose any. Juniper berries is a common one with caraway. You can add some ginger, carrots, there's tons of different. And I'll show you some of the recipes that I have up at the front. But
is there anything that ferments quicker than anything else? Like spice-wise, like is ginger just as quick to blend as caraway?
yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if the spices I've noticed that make too much of a difference.
Okay.
I definitely noticed that I've played around with some fruit actually. So one of the orange one that I have up front has carrots, apples, hot pepper, and ginger in it, and a small amount of cabbage. The ones that, and it was interesting. So it's kind of, and I did put a little bit of a whey starter in that one, just because with fruit you kind of want to give it, because the fruit can take on some different sort of yeast bacteria and other things, which not necessarily that they're bad, it's just a different fermentation process. So if you add the whey, it kind of helps to keep the lactic acid. So they seem to, and they'll go to, fruits can go towards alcohol as well, so you probably wouldn't do them as long. I've noticed that I left the fruit ones a little too long, so they probably would have been 3 days. But that's where it really is. It's trial and error, and it really is a learning process, because I've given the same recipe. So this one here that I've given you, the golden and ruby. These two, I don't have the golden one here tonight, but I have the ruby, and these are favorites. I make these a lot, and this is the recipe that I give most people. And everybody who's made this and then gives me a jar, it tastes different.
When I looked at mine online, I don't think it asks to put water on it.
Yeah, so you definitely want to have it submerged in the water as you start eating it too. So okay, so let's get back to, you open it up, or you're noticing it has that mold in there. It's not really something that you need to be too afraid of. Mold, even white foam, bubbly's good. Is you can take that off, take even that first just inch layer off, and everything, as long as you didn't kind of poke it down inside, everything's fine. And even because of the lactic acid bacteria is so predominant, and that's really what it is. It's going to sort of fight off any of the other bacteria that might be in there. So you can just kind of scoop that out. And the other question, did you have another one?
Actually, I was going to ask you, when I make sauerkraut, the way we always made it, you shred the cabbage and you add the salt, mix it all in just as you did, but we often just use our hands to mix it up, and then really, really pack it in. And then I've never added water to it, because we find that after 10 minutes or so, the salt starts drawing the water out, and all we do is pack it down enough, and then we would use a plate instead of cabbage leaves and put a weight on it. And it's always left open, like I cover with a cheesecloth. But I'm just wondering, is that a different fermentation process then, because it's aerobic rather than anaerobic like this? Would it be a different?
It's going to be, what's that?
Online, they still call it anaerobic.
It is
you
still,
know what
I
it is,
know,
because the
it is
cabbage is still not
it is
exposed
still,
to the air.
yeah.
That's why they say it's always important to keep the layer of water. So
Yes.
okay, yeah, so it is
It
still
still
anaerobic,
is the
right.
same process.
Yeah, because the cabbage is always underwater.
Yeah, submerged.
Okay.
So that's
right.
okay. Sorry, that was the original question. So the water, I typically add more water because I like the juice.
Yeah.
I just find that if you're not eating it as quickly, it can kind of just discolor a little bit. And again, that doesn't, kind of go grayish sometimes, or maybe even a little bit pinkish, depending on some of the vegetables that are in there. And again, it's still fine. But if it does go black, then I probably, again, I would scrape that top layer off. And that's where I usually just keep it. I mean, even if, say, I've eaten it and I've drank a lot of the juice and it's kind of started to dry out, I'll just add some water to it and put it back in the fridge. And it'll just keep it.
It doesn't have to be a brine or anything.
Yeah, no, it just seems to keep it fresher.
So other than tasting good, there must be more reasons to make it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. So yeah, does anyone have any ideas of why they love it so much? Does it taste, or does anyone use it in a medicinal, therapeutic way?
We used it to help with digestion of proteins, especially dense proteins like meat protein.
Yeah. So that's number one. Probably one of the number one things that I suggest for people to eat it with. So the wonderful thing about, and sorry, just before I forget, is the other thing is, if it is bad, you'll know it's bad. Because, I mean, yes, they smell, but you'll know that it's just going to be a smell that you're just not going to want to go near, so you'll toss it.
Yeah. I was just going to add, as far as why else we eat it, my sister-in-law was in a really bad car accident 3 years ago, and her physiotherapist suggested that she eat sauerkraut as often as possible, and he said it helps with the inflammation. It'll help control inflammation.
Especially cabbage in
It's an
general.
anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, cabbage in general is just really soothing to the digestive tract. So the wonderful thing, even just about it, or what I definitely recommend to people if they are just introducing it into their diet, is to eat it like a condiment. It's best to eat small amounts of it more often than eating a large bowl of it. And if you do just introduce yourself to a large bowl of it, you might just find it wise. So you might just, and sometimes even people have tried it and they say, oh, I get this burning, sort of this gassing, it's uncomfortable. But again, it's very detoxifying. It's really going to pull out a lot of bad bacteria and any sort of toxins that are in our digestive tract. Because really what it is you've created a probiotic for yourself. So, and it is a lot of fiber, so you can get that gas. So that's why it's really important to slowly introduce. And then that is a good sign that things are sort of reestablishing themselves. The good bacteria are kind of fighting and winning the war and taking over. So maybe it's just kind of a little bit of a battlefield going on in there. And then once that is cleansed out, then you'll probably have some relief with that. But and that's what a lot of people kind of notice. It's really important to just, when you're eating it, to get the benefits, is eating it like a condiment. It's just 1 or 2 bites even with every meal. But really, really helpful with, like you said, with the animal proteins. It can be really helpful with that. So, hence throwing it on a sausage or eating it with some turkey. That's where some of the ones that you can add the fruit is really good to eat with someone different. Things like that. So there's so many different ways that you can, just once you start eating more of it, and you can add different things and, blend it in a dressing or with an oil as a dressing for salad. Just plunk it on your salad, just as it's dressing on its own.
Just on the subject of adding fruit, could you add like dried cranberries or something, or does it have to be fresh fruit?
No, it's best to add actually the dried.
So you could, because I'm saying you get the benefit of the cranberries as well, right?
Yeah, that would be a really good one too. Yeah.
Why would dried be better?
Dry, just because if you're going to add the, like if you added the fresh, it would really just kind of get on that mushy sort of.
Get too edgy too fast.
Yeah. It probably doesn't really, it's probably a little bit more of the texture. I would think that, I would suggest that. But yeah, so cabbage, again, lots of vitamin C, which is really good, when we have an abundance of cabbages in the fall season, and then that's where we can start to do the fermentation process, and we can carry this all through the winter. I mean, it's amazing probiotic. 70% of our immune system is in our digestive tract, so when you think about that, and loading it with vitamin C, loading it with beneficial bacteria, definitely got a head start to the season. The refrigeration process is what slows the fermentation down. So even if, so say you've made 6 jars, and you know that they're ripe, they're ready to go, you can just put them in your fridge and you don't have to open them or anything, and they're going to be in, I mean, they're going to be good in there for, I mean, definitely up to 6 to 8 months. And, but it's just the ones that are open, you know, you kind of want to be, but even those, even once you open it, if you keep them in water, they're good for a while, and again, you'll know if it's kind of gone a little wrong on you or anything, so.
My aunt and uncle used to put them in a Ziploc bag and freeze them. When it comes out, it's still as crunchy as. I keep mine in the garage. It's in a big crock. And
Yeah, yeah, you know, if you have a front
Yeah.
porch or cold storage or any of that kind of stuff that you can
That's
store.
what I was gonna say, if it's just a cool spot, as long as you leave it in its initial sealed state, it should keep quite well, right?
The other thing about lactic acid, I was reading about lactic acid bacteria is actually one of the first bacteria that were introduced to for our mother's breast milk. So that's some interesting more fact information. But yeah, as far as, you know, it's definitely really helpful. A lot of people with IBS or Crohn's or irritable bowel, just, you know, inflammation, anything really that's relevant to the digestive tract that have concerns, gout.
Mine's upper digestive problems.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's just, you know, it's just really important to slowly introduce them. And then just sort of see, just give your body that time to adjust to it. And even especially if there is some dysbiosis bacterial issues. So there's the handout that I gave you here, just talking a bit about dysbiosis. It's just basically when, you know, the bad guys have kind of taken over the good guys. So, and, you know, there's thousands and thousands of different bacteria in our digestive tract. And, you know, the bad guys, they eat everything and anything. And number one is sugar. But they just, you know, they're kind of like the bottom feeders. They're just like, go for it, everything. And especially if we're having some digestive concerns in our upper digestive tract, even in our stomach, and they're moving down in there, then it's just like a big feeding party for them. Whereas the good guys, they're a little bit pickier, you know, they're kind of like, oh, you know, give me the good sauerkraut. So, you know, they are a little bit trickier. So you definitely want to be, so that's kind of where you'll start to feel that kind of war. So sometimes when people are experiencing some digestive concerns, some bloating, even heartburn, a lot of those concerns can really be, you know, relevant to dysbiosis, which can be, you know, related to antibiotics or stress or birth control pills. There's some other things that would probably do to set back your flora. But
Chlorinated water? Town
fluoridate,
water?
yeah, yeah,
Swimming?
yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
if you were to, because German style, we always heat the sauerkraut up. We don't boil it, but does that destroy any of the probiotics? Heating,
The
does
heating
does
process.
destroy?
So you just mean like cooking
Yeah. So you-
cabbage? Or you have a sauerkraut and you're cooking the sauerkraut?
the second.
Okay, so you have, so, yes, so the
You're
heat.
just warming them, you said.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, we're not, because that's how my husband's family. They always warm
Yeah.
up their sauerkraut. They have
Yeah.
it almost hot, and they heat the sausages or wieners in it to bring them up to.
I'll check on the temperature of
Yeah,
that.
what, at
There's
what
gotta be-
temperature? Yeah,
At what temperature, but they're definitely.
because it would denature it.
Because if you think of it, it's passive, because at that point you're almost pasteurizing. I mean, you're
Yeah.
not, but you are pasteurizing.
Yeah, because we always ate it cold. We often ate it cold.
Yeah,
but-
yeah. So that's where even when I suggest putting it into, it's like when you think of miso, it's, you know, it's a fermented food as well. So when you add it, you don't add boiling water to make miso soup. It's just to a certain temperature. So it would be the same sort of thing. So I'm sure it can get heated because you can add the cultured vegetables to soups and stews, but you don't want it to be cooking. Well, it's cooking, adding it. You just
Yeah.
add it to your bowl onto the side or something. But that's a good question. I'll check on the
What
temperature exactly. And it might actually probably be in that book as well.
So once you get used to it, is it fine to eat more? That's just an initial stage to eat little bits of it?
Yeah, just to see how your body adjusts and see how you feel with it. But again, you know, try to, if you can eat at breakfast, lunch, dinner, or just a bite even with all your foods or all your meals. And, you know, maybe just a bite if you're going to introduce it right away into all 3 meals and then see how it goes. And then, I mean, because I can eat a jar myself in probably 3 days now, but especially if it's a really good one. So,
So it's not bad to eat a lot of it once you're used to it?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions? If you want, we can go up to the front table and start trying, but does anyone have any
You were going to
questions?
tell us about the difference to
Oh, kimchi.
kimchi,
Yeah.
and
the-
kefir.
I won't get into kefir because that's sort of a whole other fermentation topic itself, but the kimchi is, it really basically is the same thing. It's just there's so many, they use even a fish sauce, they're using different spices. It generally is a bit more of a spicy, but it all is the same thing. It's just different terms, like miso, tempeh, what else? Umaboshi plums is another Japanese fermented plum. Yeah, so you can ferment chutneys, you can ferment relishes. You know, really, before pasteurization was introduced, this is what we were doing. So if you think about any of the climates that we were using, they were lacto-fermented at that time. So the red one that I have is the ruby that's on your recipes. And that's predominantly, I actually just opened that one tonight. So predominantly, usually you taste the, actually I'll just let you guys taste it. So that's the red. And the orange one that I have here is the carrot, apple, hot pepper, ginger, and some cabbage. This one here is the one that we just had made. I thought I added a little bit of kale. There might be a little bit of dulse flakes in there, so ocean vegetables that you won't even taste. But that's just the traditional with the caraway. And this one here is the leaping over the line, taking a risk. Cabbage, kale, just a few apples to try to give it a sweetness, turmeric, and rosemary, and fennel. So my thought with that one though was sort of this bitter for sort of liver gallbladder, the sweet to just kind of balance that out a little bit with the fennel and the apple, and just the turmeric for, again, anti-inflammatory. As far as measurements go, you just got to guess. Because they all, each jar looks a little bit different. Because when you're starting to make big quantities too, you're kind of just stirring it all and mixing it all. So when I tend to really go for it with 5 pounds of carrots and 5 pounds of apples, for example, I kind of do all the apples and put them in a big bowl, and do all the cabbage, do all the carrots, and then then you just kind of combine them all, so then you kind of have at least an idea of your ratios. But, so the other orange one was cabbage, just a little bit of cabbage, carrots and apples, hot peppers, ginger, salt, and then a little bit of whey. So I probably used about half a cup in, I made pounds of it, so
Half a cup of whey?
Of whey. If you do use the whey, you don't need to use, I would use 2 tablespoons of the salt. You want to
Use less.
Powdered whey
use less
or-
salt.
No,
I made my own whey.
Okay.
So if anyone that was missed this part, to make your own whey is if you buy a yogurt and then you just put a cheesecloth over a jar or a bowl and you put your yogurt in there, what drips out is your whey. And then you can use the top part and add herbs and spices and make your own cream cheese, which is really nice. So you don't have to add the whey. It's not necessary. So that was that recipe. The green one was cabbage, kale, turmeric, fennel, and rosemary.
So you buy everything organic, that goes without saying.
Yeah, good question for that too. And again, that's stressed in a lot of the resources where I've looked as well. Nutritional value is going to be a lot higher. And I haven't experienced this because I always use organic vegetables, but they're saying that they just won't ferment the same even. So.
That makes
Because
sense.
it needs to have the naturally occurring.
One thing that I heard as well was
Nutrient
it's better to use the cabbages if you're using a lot of cabbage. The reason that a lot of people made them in the fall was when they're fresh is that they thought the enzymes are going to be a lot more active than when you're buying cabbage in the grocery store in March or April and trying to make it. If they've been in storage for months and months, they're not going to react the same way.
So thanks for watching and getting through all that. There's a lot of information that was packed in there. It was all very valuable. And definitely let me know what you think in the comments below. Check out the links in the description below to check out Tracy's Facebook page as well as her website. She also has a Twitter account to link to there if you want to go follow her. And yeah, see what she's about. I'm going to encourage her to keep putting out content and maybe we'll get her on here again in the future to talk about some broader dietary things that she's quite knowledgeable on. And with that, I'll talk to you next time. Take care and embrace life without limits.
Yeah, yeah. And what I always do is just, I always, every few days when he's passing, I'll say, okay, that one's ready. And usually get the bubbles at the top, and then, I usually just open one and try it, but I usually leave it.
it pulls down?
Pops up.
You
Like,
can down,
push the acid. You'll see, and sometimes if you've added enough liquid, you'll see all the liquid at the bottom, because as they're starting to create that pressure on that one.
More beta-carotene.
Yeah, yeah.
They all have their own benefits, right, like the color.
Yeah, yeah.
Color is the right.
Phytonutrients, yeah. Yeah.
So this one was the golden one?
No,
that was, this one was.
It's not on the regular.
It's not on.
Tracy's there now. He's the one who will sit down and he's gonna write some notes, and there's lots of good questions being generated, so take a break, so you don't all explode. Start singing earlier. Yeah. We'll just do it as, it's like a.
What happens in Fergus stays in Fergus. Okay.
The first time I had them this week, I was at an Kroger's retreat in Colorado. And every meal, we had cultured vegetables. And so you think like 20 people having cultured vegetables, it was like pretty crazy by the second day.
Yeah.
Everybody was commenting on what was happening.
Especially,
Meals.
yeah.
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 Yeah, they even put it on